Hey beautiful, have you considered subscribing to our channel? It helps us make quality content for you. Help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers.
So, I recently dealt with something I never thought I'd say out loud. My property got raided by cops, and the reason? An HOA dispute. They showed up in vests with guns and a clipboard that looked official, except every part of it was fake. Funny thing is, they thought they were setting the trap. Turns out they walked straight into mine. Let me start from the beginning. Before we dive in, let me know where you're listening from today. You ever chase a dream so long, by the time you finally get it, you don't even trust it? That was me, sitting on a porch I built, sipping coffee grown on someone else's land, looking out at 120 acres of freedom I paid for in sweat and scars. No bosses, no 4 a.m. calls, no strangers yelling in my face. Just me, my dogs, my goats, a tractor older than some of my bones, and silence. Not the kind of silence that makes you uneasy. The kind that makes your nervous system uncoil. The kind that whispers, "You're home." So yeah, when I bought this ranch, I thought I was done with conflict. I thought wrong. It started with a sign. White, plastic, zip-tied to my fence like it belonged there. Notice, property under review, Simmons Valley. HOA compliance required. I stood there for a full minute, blinking at it like it might explain itself. It didn't. So I ripped it down, tossed it in the fire barrel, and chalked it up to some bored kids playing HOA cosplay. That was mistake number one, underestimating how far someone will go when they think a clipboard gives them power. Mistake number two, assuming Karen would stop. Because the next day, she showed up. SUV the color of hospital walls, parked halfway across my gravel like it was part of a tactical formation. Out stepped a woman in pastel pink, pressed khakis and mirrored sunglasses, clipboard tucked like a sidearm under one arm. She didn't look at my land. She looked at me, like I was a problem to be solved. "Hi there," she chirped, like we were about to exchange banana bread recipes. I wiped my hands on a rag and leaned against the fence post. "Help you?" "I'm Karen Simmons, HOA president, just doing my rounds. Thought I'd personally welcome you to the neighborhood." I blinked. "HOA!" She smiled wider. "Simmons Valley Homeowners Association. We're a chartered community coalition focused on maintaining visual and environmental standards across properties." I actually laughed. "This is farmland. The only visual standard out here is not crashing into cows." She didn't flinch. "Our bylaws cover fencing height, structure types, livestock ratios, and noise thresholds. We're currently in an awareness phase, but citations will begin at the end of the month." "Lady," I said, "you can't cite a goat." "Oh, we don't cite the goats," she said sweetly, "just their owners." She handed me a manila envelope labeled, "Welcome Packet, Action Required." Before I could reply, she spun on her orthopedic heel and walked off like she'd just dropped off a jury summons. I opened it right there. Page after page of fake regulations, diagrams of my barn, red circled photos of my fencing from angles I didn't even know existed. Apparently my satellite dish was visible from the southern view corridor, and that constituted a visual obstruction. I didn't throw it out. I burned it. 2 days later, new signs appeared. Bigger, laminated, zip-tied, higher, one stapled to my barn door. "Under enforcement review, violations pending." I tore them down again. This time, they came back with nails. And not just signs, men, 2 of them, late 30s, matching khakis. Vests with iron-on patches that read, HOA Patrol. I watched from the porch as they walked my fence line with walkie-talkies and clipboards like they were on some kind of mission. One even pointed at my tractor and muttered into his mic. I stepped off the porch. They froze like deer at the sound of a shotgun. "Something I can help you with, boys?" One spoke, nervous, rehearsed. "We're conducting a compliance sweep under HOA protocol." I walked closer. "Got a badge?" "We operate under the Simmons Valley Charter." "Great. Then you're trespassing under the Callahan Property Charter. Leave." They did, but not before one of them dropped his clipboard. Inside, patrol maps, routes, properties marked with red X's. Mine was labeled Alpha, High Resistance. I took a photo. Then I called a buddy in town, a sheriff's deputy. He hadn't heard of any HOA, but he had heard of Karen. "Oh yeah," he said. She tried to find the feed store last year, called it a rural noise disturbance. That's when I realized this wasn't a one-time thing. Karen had plans. Plans that didn't stop at laminated signs. Plans that included men with walkie-talkies, fake websites, patrols, and maybe worse. I started prepping, not for war, for nonsense. Motion sensors, trail cams, remote lights. Nothing lethal, just enough to remind them. This land, it bites back. Because the next time they cross my line, they weren't going to walk away with a warning. And the next time they came, they didn't knock, they came before dawn, in silence. And they brought backup. But they didn't know. They'd just walked into a place where I write the rules. You don't forget what it sounds like when trouble's trying to be quiet. There's a specific rhythm to it, measured, almost careful, like a heartbeat, just a tick too fast. I heard it before I saw anything. The wind was dead, sky still black. Even the chickens hadn't started their usual morning arguments. But that crunch on the gravel, too heavy to be wind, too light to be a truck, too damn coordinated to be a deer. I didn't panic, just grabbed my boots and mug, already half full with yesterday's reheated coffee. Muscle memory. I didn't have to look. I already knew. They were back. Fake HOA troops. Karen's clipboard commandos. I'd figured they'd try again. Just not this soon. I stepped into the kitchen and flicked off the interior lights, quieted my breathing, and listened. Crunch, pause, crunch, crunch, multiple. 5, maybe 6. I moved to the side window. Out by the barn, 5 shadows moved in a lazy arc. Flashlights off, radio earpieces in, vests, khakis. One guy had a clipboard again, because apparently even paramilitary LARPers need paperwork. But the kicker? They had headlamps now, strapped to their foreheads like coal miners, or discount special forces. I crouched low and scanned. 3 of them veered off toward the east fence, where Linda the goat slept like royalty. 2 others hung near the front gate. Then came the voice, crackled and half-whispered, through one of their radios. Team Alpha in position. Begin sweep. Target is presumed armed but compliant under Phase 1. Target. Presumed armed. Phase 1? I chuckled. Because what else do you do when the neighborhood watch thinks they're raiding Osama bin Farmer? But the laugh didn't reach my eyes. Something in me had already shifted. That old hum returned, the one I hadn't felt since Kandahar. The weight behind the eyes, the coiled breath in the lungs, awareness, training, threat assessment. I moved to the mudroom, slipped on the coat with the emergency light trigger in the pocket. Not because I needed it, because I wanted to see what happened when they saw me back. They crossed the second fence, quiet, confident, until one of them tripped the wire, click, and then, boom. Not an explosion, a flood of light and sound. High-beam floodlights burst on like I'd summoned God with a remote. Sirens screamed from 4 different spots. The barn lit up like Times Square. 2 guys dropped flat. One screamed and dove behind the water trough. Another collided with Linda's enclosure. Bad move. Linda rammed him in the thigh, flipped him over, and then stared down at him like she expected him to explain himself. I stepped onto the porch. Didn't rush, didn't yell. Just sipped my coffee and said, "Good morning, gentlemen. Y'all planning to announce yourselves, or were you hoping for the element of surprise?" One of them straightened. Clipboard guy. "We are acting under HOA Emergency Code 7A to seize non-compliant property." Emergency Code 7A? I raised an eyebrow. "Did y'all make that up in a coloring book?" He didn't flinch. "We are empowered by community vote to remove unauthorized structures, reclaim misuse of land, and enforce property value security." "You gonna enforce it with that clipboard?" Another one, shaking, sweating, raised something. It looked like a taser. "This is a citizens' enforcement zone," he said, voice cracking. "We are within operational bounds." I took one step down from the porch. "You're in my yard, armed, threatening seizure of property under fake laws printed on a library computer." Clipboard guy pulled out a folder. "This document authorizes us..." I snatched it. Half the pages said draft. One had a coffee stain and what looked like a slice of melted cheese stuck to the corner. "This looks like it was written by a sleep-deprived 10th grader with control issues." Suddenly, gravel, tires, a car, but not one of theirs. Sheriff Langston. Red and blue lights stuttered down the driveway like divine intervention. Squad car rolled in, slow and loud. The HOA enforcers froze. Clipboard guy turned. Abort? But it was too late. Langston stepped out, squinting into the chaos. One of the fake cops was still being screamed at by Linda. Another had buried his face in the dirt like it offered legal protection. Langston looked at me, deadpan. Callahan, what the hell is this? Pre-breakfast theater, I said. Opening act, HOAS WAT team. Langston turned to the group. Hands where I can see 'em. Drop the clipboards. One guy actually said, we're acting under civilian compliance jurisdiction. Langston walked right up, grabbed the badge on his vest, and ripped it clean off. Buddy, this says compliance officer, tier 2. You're lucky it doesn't say mall cop. He held up a binder, leather-bound, homemade. The cover, Simmons Valley. Compliance Authority, Internal Codex. Langston flipped through. Color-coded charts, rank structure, lamination. God help me, there were pages labeled violation classes. Langston read aloud. Class 1 violation, fencing misalignment. Class 2, unauthorized rooster activity. Class 3, hostile resident behavior. He snapped the book shut. I've seen cults with fewer rules. One guy blurted out, we were told to enforce protocol. By who? Tierines. Langston glanced at me. I said it first. Karen, 3 arrests, 2 citations, 1 full report filed with the county investigator. But the kicker? Langston found a list tucked in the binder, a spreadsheet, with names, mine, highlighted red. Obstructionist, high threat. Others, crossed out. Langston whistled. You know any of these? Yeah, I said. Neighbors. 2 sold out this year, 1 went dark. This isn't just HOA cosplay, he said. This is coordinated, targeted. He sighed. I'll call in a fraud investigator, maybe even the feds, but you should know. Karen's doubling down, she's not quitting. I already knew, because later that night, a certified letter landed in my mailbox. Karen, she was suing me for hostile disruption of a sanctioned community action, for undermining volunteer enforcement personnel, for intentional obstruction of cooperative land reclamation. And the worst part, she had a real lawyer. Someone was funding her, someone with more reach than a folding table and a clipboard. And tucked inside the envelope was a list of names, not just mine, not just neighbors, but one name I knew better than anyone, someone I'd shared beers with, someone who helped build my barn, and next to their name, a single word, informant. They say power corrupts, but what nobody tells you is how fast it happens when the only thing standing between someone and total control is a clipboard. Karen didn't fold after the arrests. She didn't back down. She doubled down and dragged the whole damn neighborhood with her. It started with the flyers. She didn't just post them in mailboxes, she launched them, printed in grayscale, clipped to plastic stakes, and stabbed into the ground at the entrance to the road like military signage. Each one had a photo of my property, aerial shot, probably from a drone, labeled Zone B, non-compliant, high risk. Below that, bullet points, unauthorized livestock, illegal fencing configuration, documented verbal hostility to enforcement officers. Then the best part, subject has refused all attempts at reintegration. Neighbors are advised to avoid unsanctioned contact. I couldn't believe it. She was distributing social exile notices. But the worst of it? It worked. Neighbors who used to wave stopped making eye contact. The guy who sold me feed quietly raised his prices. One of the families who came to my 4th of July cookout last year posted a message in the community group. We support order. We support community standards. If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the risk. I stood in my field, staring at a sign about my hostile goats, and realized this wasn't a petty feud anymore. Karen was building a regime. And then she held the rally in her driveway. No chairs, no permits. Just a fold-out table, a microphone, and a poster board that read, Emergency Compliance Briefing, Tier 3 Response. I stood across the street, didn't hide, just watched. At least 15 people showed up. Some looked confused, some looked scared. A few were already wearing HOA-branded safety vests. Karen tapped the mic. "We're under siege," she said, "and it's coming from within." She held up one of the flyers with my property photo. "This resident has refused compliance for 3 consecutive review cycles. He has verbally threatened officers. He has refused dialogue." She pointed at me. "He thinks he's untouchable, but no one is above the rules." She passed out flyers like communion wafers. "He may call it freedom. We call it negligence. We call it disorder." I shouted across the road. "You call a goat screaming at 6 a.m. a security threat." Karen ignored me. Effective immediately, the HOA is initiating a community isolation protocol. Residents are discouraged from contact. No favors, no support, no engagement. The crowd nodded. Some clapped. That was when I realized it wasn't just propaganda. She had followers. Later that night, I found a notice in my mailbox. It wasn't mailed. It was laminated. Resident classification, Tier 3, critical non-compliant. Under it, remove livestock, paint barn, neutral gray, attend re-education seminar, and submit apology statement to board. There was even a time and date listed for the seminar. Location, Karen's garage. One of the sessions was called Silent Fences, How Your Property Speaks for You. I nearly choked. This was Orwell with a polo shirt, but it got worse. 2 of my trail cams went offline the next day. Then a third. When I checked the wiring, they'd been cut. Langston came out. "You think it's her?" "She's the only one who knows where I put these." He nodded. "She's not just posturing anymore." That night, a white sedan parked 2 properties down. Didn't move. I watched it through binoculars. Tinted windows, no tags, just idling. I walked toward it with a flashlight. The engine revved and it peeled out. The plates registered to something called Community Horizon Outreach. The director? Karen. She'd built a shell nonprofit just to cover surveillance. And then came Max, my dog, border collie, 8 years old, smarter than most people I've worked with. That night, I heard him whimpering near the barn. I found him behind the ATV, shaking, one paw bleeding. He yelped when I touched it. Blood, deep cut, embedded glass. I checked the barn floor, found it, jagged shards, scattered near the rear door, green-brown glass, purposefully hidden. I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I just picked him up and whispered, "It's okay, I've got you." Langston arrived 20 minutes later. He swept the area, took samples. "This wasn't an accident," he said. "This was a message." And he was right, because I'd reached my line, and Karen had just danced over it. The next day I went public. I uploaded everything. The video of the fake raid, the fake seizure warrants, her flyers, Max's injury, surveillance logs, the HOA's law book, and laminated re-education guides. I posted it with a caption, "When the HOA thinks they're the FBI." Within hours, the video exploded. Comments, shares, messages from other rural homeowners who'd seen the same tactics in their areas. Within 24 hours, it had over 300,000 views. People started turning. Karen's online defenders vanished. Her compliance team, half of them resigned. But she wasn't done, because 2 days later, she showed up at my door. No clipboard, just a manila folder. No smile. "You think this is about goats?" I said nothing. "You think this ends with me?" She stepped forward, voice low. "You've kicked something you don't understand." She handed me the folder, then walked away. Inside, printed emails, signed memos. A document labeled Regional Initiative, Rural Behavioral Management, Phase 2. It had government seals, contacts I recognized, people I'd worked with years ago. It wasn't just HOA nonsense anymore. This wasn't local. This was federal. That folder didn't just implicate Karen. It exposed something bigger, a plan, a network, and my name was listed as primary resistance node. They thought I'd be easy to silence. They forgot who I used to be, and what I still am. The folder sat on my kitchen table for 6 hours before I opened it again. Not because I was afraid of what I'd find, because I already knew what it meant. It had government headers, agency abbreviations, real formatting, not the stuff Karen printed at the UPS store. The top page, Rural Behavioral Management, Phase 2. I stared at it like it was an old enemy, Because, in a way, it was. This wasn't just paperwork. This was doctrine. I'd seen it before, overseas, back when our job wasn't to fight. It was to reshape communities. Post-conflict engagement zones, they called them, but we knew what it really was. Control through soft power. Change the signs, change the rules, change the way people talk about their neighbors. And now it was here, in a 3-ring binder, carried to my doorstep by a woman whose hobby was code enforcement cosplay. Langston pulled up 2 hours later. I didn't say anything at first, just slid the folder across the table. He opened it, flipped through, page by page. "Where'd you get this?" She gave it to me? On purpose? She said I'd kicked something I couldn't stop. Langston closed the folder. Then he called the county attorney. She came out same day. Tough, sharp. Rode in with an investigator and a portable scanner. They took the folder apart, scanned every page, ran the headers, verified the stamps. Then she looked at me. "Did you know this program?" "I knew the people who built it." She blinked. "You were in on this?" "Number?" But I was in the room. The state got involved fast. Within 24 hours, we had a warrant. Karen's name was now tied to at least 5 separate cases across county lines, all involving false citations, impersonation, and real financial loss. The goal had always been land, quietly push out rural owners, consolidate properties, enforce uniform standards through scare tactics and bureaucracy. Karen wasn't the author. She was the test pilot. Langston and 2 agents rolled out the next morning, warrant in hand, cruiser out front, dash cam rolling. They knocked, nothing. Knocked again. Curtains shifted, but no answer. Finally, she opened it, wearing that same smug smirk, clipboard in hand like it had diplomatic immunity. "Do you have a warrant?" Langston held it up. She didn't even flinch. "You're making a mistake." "You first," he said, stepping inside. The search started in her study. Books, maps, a fake HOA ledger. Then the real find, behind a false panel in the bookshelf. A narrow doorway, no knob, just a sliding latch. Inside, a back office. It was surgical. Wall-to-wall binders. A whiteboard with names and faces, maps, schedules, rotation charts, a bank of monitors, all turned off. 3 of them had camera feeds still paused. One of those was my barn. There were 6 labeled binders, resident tier guide, compliance scripts, corrective language index, psychological reinforcement tactics, asset conversion model, phase 3, strategy outline. Langston flipped through the first. Inside, files on me, my name, my property layout, my habits. You wake up around 4:50 most mornings, feed animals by 6, occasionally leave lights on in the front room past midnight, rarely seen with visitors. Pattern rating, defiant, autonomous, vigilance-prone. Langston looked at me. They were profiling you. Not just me. He flipped again. 6 other names, other residents, all categorized. 1 labeled compliant, 1 labeled exit achieved, 1 labeled pending disruption. That last one, she'd moved out last month. They found a wall map in the back, 3 counties, red pins, blue pins, black pins, each labeled with a code. P1, probationary, P2, persuasion, P3, physical relocation. Encouraged, Langston stepped back. "This isn't HOA, this is psychological warfare." We bagged everything. The attorney filed charges that afternoon: criminal harassment, wire fraud, identity manipulation, illegal surveillance, impersonating a public official, conspiracy to defraud. Karen's lawyer tried to spin it, said it was a community experiment in grassroots cohesion. Langston called it what it was, a cult, with a mailing list. That night, someone knocked at my gate. Jerry, the neighbor who'd stopped waving. He looked broken. "I didn't know it would go this far," he said. "You believed her?" He didn't answer, just looked at the dirt. "She told us if we didn't help enforce it, we'd be next." I nodded once, closed the gate behind him. 2 days later, the county cracked the last hard drive, and what we saw blew the case wide open. Because it wasn't just me. There were files on 6 other properties, Video, reports, drone footage, fencing audits, even voice recordings from porch conversations. These people didn't just want your land, they wanted to watch you first, predict you, control you, then erase you. And Karen, she wasn't the only node in the system. One of the signatures on the Phase 2 proposal was someone I knew, an old intel officer, retired, last seen consulting in D.C. I stared at it for a long time, not because I was shocked, because I knew exactly what kind of people they were and what they'd do to keep their blueprint from unraveling. One last drive was labeled Phase 4, Contingency. It was locked, encrypted, but the title said enough. Because Phase 3 was about control, and Phase 4, that meant someone was planning for failure or resistance, and they were ready to act, which meant I had one shot left before this thing went national, and I was taking it head on. The drone came back at 4:12 a.m., same low hum, different model, faster, smaller, smarter. It didn't hover this time. It swept low across the barn roof, then buzzed the tree line and disappeared. 15 minutes later, I found a circle burned into the ground near the north fence, perfectly symmetrical. Black paint. 2 slashed lines cutting through the middle like an X. Same symbol Langston found on the Clearwater property. Same one used on their non-compliant targets. It wasn't just a warning, it was a marking, and whatever it meant they were coming. They didn't knock, they didn't call, they didn't send another flyer, they just walked in. 3 of them, no headlights, no vehicle in sight. I spotted them on the southwest cam first. Thermal signature said they'd been sitting in the woods for 20 minutes. Now they were approaching my driveway. Black vests, boots, walkie-talkies muted. One held a clipboard, the other 2 had rifles. Real ones, clean, tightly slung. I didn't panic. I shut the laptop, locked the barn, walked calmly back to the porch, watched them. Didn't speak. They didn't either. Then clipboard guy stepped forward. "We're here for seizure protocol." "You think this is legal?" I asked. He didn't blink. "You've failed to comply with re-education notices. Your vehicle and property are listed as forfeitable under Emergency Clause B9. He pulled a page from his folder and held it up like it meant something. "You've been designated as a primary resistance node." The man to his right twitched, kept glancing at the trees, kept adjusting his grip. The one on the left, calm, too calm, eyes glassy, focused, not on me, on the door behind me. "You're outnumbered," clipboard guy said. "Don't make this hard." I stepped forward 1 pace. "Tell me something," I said. "What? Who trained you?" He hesitated. That's when I knew they weren't real, not law, not military. They were believers. They took another step forward. I stepped back, tapped the silent trigger on my watch. Steel barriers rose from the driveway with a low hiss. Motion sensors pinged, floodlights engaged, not steady beams, strobes, red, disorienting, meant to confuse. Clipboard guy shielded his eyes. Twitchy guy raised his rifle. That was his mistake. My deck rig kicked in. 2 flashbangs deployed from opposite corners. No shrapnel, just pressure and sound. Loud enough to reset your brain for 30 seconds. They dropped. And just like that, my field turned into theirs. Except I'd planned for this. As they flailed, I moved. Under the side stair, rolled right. Hit the failsafe line I hadn't tested in 2 years. A buried cable set to trigger an old theft deterrent system I'd rigged for equipment haulers. Across the field, 4 directional sirens fired up, piercing, oscillating, frequency coded to bounce off the barn and scatter echoes. The sound disoriented them instantly. Twitchy guy staggered, rifle half raised, blind. I closed the distance, grabbed the barrel, twisted, drove his shoulder into the gravel with my full weight. He didn't even fight. The calm one turned to run, but stopped cold. Langston's cruiser had arrived. No siren, no lights, just his voice. "Weapons down, now!" He stepped out, sidearm drawn. Back up behind him. Real law, real response. Clipboard guy tried to reach for something. Langston fired a warning shot, not into the air, into the dirt. A puff of dust between the man's boots. He froze. I said now. They dropped their weapons, all of them. 4 more emerged from the woods, hands raised. 7 in total, armed, trained, poorly. but enough to be dangerous. Langston cuffed the first one, turned to me. They said they were part of something bigger. I nodded. They're not bluffing. Karen, her playbook, her language, her followers. Langston held up a badge he had pulled off one of their vests. Enforcement Tier 1, Phase 4, certified. You know what that means? I do now. At the station, they processed all 7. Most of them wouldn't talk, but the quiet one did. Right before they loaded him into the cruiser, he looked at me through the bars, smiled. Phase 4 isn't about you. I didn't speak. You think it ends here? You think this was about land? He leaned closer to the bars. It's about pattern disruption. You're not the enemy. You're the prototype. Then he winked, and they took him away. We found more on them, forged IDs, maps, training schedules. One of them had a printed set of instructions for emergency engagement scenarios. Another had a laminated citizen arrest card. But the most disturbing find? A group photo, 10 people, all in vests, all with fake patches. Karen in the middle, and a title above it, Phase 4, Ground Team, Unit 7. Which meant there were at least 6 more. Langston and I stood on the porch later that night, Max at my feet. The air still hadn't shifted. You think they'll come again? He asked. They won't stop, I said. Not until this goes public. Or I disappear. He looked at me sideways. You have a plan? I nodded toward the last uncracked drive on my table. It's labeled with my name. You gonna open it? Not yet. He waited. What are you waiting for? I looked out across the field. Leverage. Because inside that drive was the final piece. And once I opened it, once I saw what they had on me, I wouldn't just be defending my land. I'd be dragging the truth out of the shadows. And it wouldn't just end Karen's legacy, it might end mine. The last drive didn't come with a label, just my name, Callahan. Sharpied in block letters, no logo, no date, no context. It sat on my kitchen table for 4 days. Not because I was scared, but because I knew once I opened it, once I saw what was on it, there'd be no going back. Langston offered to run it through evidence systems. I said no. If they'd spent this much time watching me, then they deserved to see me watching back. When I finally clicked it open, the screen flashed once. Then a logo appeared. OPRM. Operational Rural Management. Not HOA, not county, not Karen, federal. A program I hadn't heard mentioned in a decade. I knew the name because I'd helped write part of it. 12 years ago, I'd submitted a report, outlined weaknesses in rural command structures, suggested techniques for post-instability recalibration. They hadn't just used my report, they'd built this entire framework from it. The drive held 4 folders. Phase 1, infiltration. Phase 2, conditioning. Phase 3, pressure. Phase 4, correction. Inside, me, drone footage, porch cams, audio from the barn, conversations with Langston. Every file had a label: subject, Callahan, classification, autonomous, strategic, influence resistant. Then came the recording. My own voice. A call from years ago, outlining protocol for managing outlier behavior clusters. They didn't just weaponize a system against me, they used my own damn blueprints. Next were the personnel files. Karen's HOA presidency, funded, promoted, managed, her flyers, her committees, her compliance task force, all part of a beta rollout under a shell nonprofit. She wasn't the architect, she was the instrument. And I wasn't the enemy, I was the test. Then came the final file. Message, Tier Alpha. Karen appeared on screen, clean, calm, smiling like this was a church announcement. If you're watching this, then you saw the truth. I didn't start this, but I believed in it, still do. People like you don't obey, you disrupt. That's why we needed you. You showed us what resistance looks like, and how to break it. Then she smiled, and the screen cut to black. I sat in silence. Not because I was broken, because I was steady. Langston showed up an hour later. You opened it? I nodded. How bad? Bad enough. He waited. What now? I end it? I didn't go to the press. I went to the source, filed a federal whistleblower complaint, redacted the neighbors, named the contractors, attached every file. Then I hit publish. The story went wide. Former employees came forward. Oversight hearings opened. Karen was indicted again, this time on federal charges. And OPRM officially decommissioned. Again. But paperwork doesn't stop ideology. Things are quiet now. Max still limps, but he runs. The barn holds, the goats yell, the fences stay up. But the weight, it doesn't leave. Sometimes Max growls when a truck slows at the gate. It never stops. But it never doesn't pause. I still get messages from strangers. It started here too. They called it a volunteer coalition. The documents looked real. We thought we were the only ones. They ask me what to do. I always say the same thing. Don't wait for someone else to fight your battle. Because if they've already drawn the map, you're already on it. There was one final email buried in the drive, encrypted, deliberately hidden. We cracked it. No body, no signature, just a subject line. Reassignment, pilot zone, Midwest beta. No explanation, no attachments, just coordinates. Not Simmons Valley, somewhere colder, somewhere flatter, somewhere even easier to disappear. Because Phase 4 didn't end here. It just moved down the list. They thought I was the variable, the disruption, the glitch. But I wasn't. I was the firewall, and I'm still standing.